right now working between US and China. Probably I'm the only person here that has been traveled between China and the US this year. I'm working on the medical field. Before I was in undocumented sweatshop worker for several decades in the US. And I've been, of course, I've been in the oppressed racist society that has been oppressed for many, many years that understand that racisms and imperialisms are all come together. So this year the virus is not just only is talking about the big health crisis, but it has been leading to has been US has been doing launching a decade of Cold War preparing from since 2008 2010 against China from the so-called labor issues to sweatshops to uh, Xinjiang, Tibet. So this is just has been an increment, the part of the U.S. campaign against China. The same thing has been the anti-immigrant movement and hysteria and xenophobia in the U.S. has been increased, specifically after the election of the Donald Trump on 2016. But let's say that since last year, when the China-US trade war heating up, and then the Hong Kong also has been on the middle of the violent fascist riots who have been backed by the US. That has been the people has been worried about what will happen to China. Is it a time that US under the Trump administration launching a new Cold War that can be overrun China, plus the so-called Xinjiang independent movement. It was until it would peak, the situation become the worst on December, that when China in that moment able to fight back against US aggression from Hong Kong, that the riots able to stop. The Xinjiang never had anything happened, and the US lost the trade war on last December. That China won all this front. And US, the elite and the Trump administration from left, not just Trump, but also from the left Democrats to right-wing, far-right, are furious that China won. That's the reason they are desperately looking for an event, an incident they can turn the table back. What happened on the January? The virus pandemic start from Wuhan, but there's no specific proof that this originated from Wuhan. That become a magnet of racism and opportunity for US launching global effort to against China and hopefully isolate China, and that would at the end US will win the so-called new Cold War they want to launch, the racist Cold War. And then they thought that the China cannot control the virus, and then the death will be astronomical, and the economy will collapse, and then the Chinese citizen will maybe turn again angry against the government for failing to control the virus, the pandemic. And at the end, China was successfully contain the virus within 2 to 3 months. And now everything going back to normal. This year, I was in China early this year, organizing a delegation from US and UK activists from around the world to China to support the Chinese activist society community, as well as understand the situation in China. That was right before the COVID, and we went to Xinjiang and met with officials and met with community activists that what we can do to support China. And then at the end of the delegation, that on the January, then the so-called COVID was started, and I left China in middle of the January and coming back to US, and then from March, the US the pandemic became our control. That's then now everyone know the US has become the worst COVID crisis in the world. Why? That you can do a comparison between US and China. Why China can successfully contain the virus and why US cannot and become a miserable failure, and then with tens, hundreds of thousands of people died, killed, and 200,000 people died. Why? That's a failure of the US imperialism that only focusing on racism, focusing on military imperialism, spending all the money on the capitalisms that do not care about the people. That not that in China, that money spent on the community, spent on the people. That's how actually the Chinese government able to fight against win the virus and fight within less than 3 months. And now in China, so everything back to normal, back to, from the community to the business and all these things. I'm coming back to China on August to continue my community work and continue my different kind of activism work. And I have been talking to people to building a solidarity between US and China. And hopefully we can build a community-based work. And so far, the people in China are really of course, I mean, American public and then also UK has been a really, really negative about China, the so-called the virus and the so-called all these lies about all this, what happened in China. So they don't understand what happened in China. And Chinese community activists to general publics has also have a very negative view about US imperialism, and they do not believe after the election, even the Biden's win the elections, that will be fundamentally changed, because there's no difference between the far-right fascist Trumps or the so-called liberal left Democratic Biden administration. The imperialism is still the same. Their exploitations may be a little different, but they're still the same. They're serving the multinational corporation. Their policy still the same. What I want to say in general is that while I've been in China, when back to US, I can try to convince the community across the country to how to work with China and to dialogue with Chinese activists. Right now, I'm in China. I do the same. Talking to the community and community activists and academia to how to build a solidarity with the US and UK's and activists from across the world. That's a real urgent need to be a community activist can work together. Sometimes the problem is that we are barking the long tree. We are not finding the right people to work or talk together. That's a really troubling to me. And we should find a more ground like this kind of communication. But also, I think that would be highly recommended. We also should be doing a bilingual, just like in US. That everyone know that if you're an immigrant activist, especially if you're serving the Latino community, you got to have English and Spanish bilingual. That's a common sense. if we are talking about China solidarity, we should bring more Chinese activists, Chinese-speaking activists, and then resolve how to do the translations. Because many Chinese activists in China also talk about U.S. and then they have a really good point of view. They want to dialogue with community activists from U.S. and peace activists around the world. But we need to build this channel. Another thing is we also wrote a book recently with a couple of community activists called in US called Capitalism Ventilator. There's a first this kind of books about COVID fighting between China and the US and why China won the COVID fight and why US failed the COVID fight. And the book was banned 2 weeks ago in Amazon. So we now launch a campaign and reprint the book by ourselves and hope that people can read it, but on the same time that in the US, doesn't matter from left to right, from tech savvy geeks to internet company to QAnon conspiracy theorists, they do not want to listen to the truth. They do not want to hear the voice, at least voice from the other people in reasonable way. We need to build a better communication channel, and we also need to make our voice loud and clear to everyone about what we stand for. Thank you.